Taking a closer look. One day, a few months before the end of my 6th grade school year, my parents told me that we were moving to Texas that summer. I was devastated. I'd lived in Colorado in the same house and had the same friends my entire life. I couldn't imagine leaving my friends behind, and I became very sad. After one particularly upsetting weekend of packing up my room, I was excited to go to school the next day. When I arrived to language arts, I realized I had left my homework at home. I walked up to my teacher, Mrs. Johnson, and tried to explain that I had been flustered and forgotten my homework. Before I could finish, Mrs. Johnson cut me off. "Maddie!" she yelled. I watched as all my classmates stopped and turned to watch. "You are incredibly irresponsible. I honestly don't care what your excuse is. You are in middle school now, and you need to learn to do better." Embarrassed and hurt, I shyly sunk back to my seat and sat in silence for the rest of class. Later that day, I caught myself zoning out and realized I had missed the entire lesson that my science teacher, Mrs. Botts, had just taught us. Frustrated with myself, I tried to rush out of the room after class. Before I could make it to the door, I heard Mrs. Botts call my name. "How are you?" she asked. "I've been noticing that you've been very distracted lately, and you're much quieter in class than you usually are." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Botts. I'll do better," I said as I tried to hurry past her. She stopped me again, and before I could help myself, I began to cry. There," she said as she comforted me. "I could tell something was wrong. Now why don't you tell me what's been going on?" I told her my family was moving. I explained I was trying to keep up with my schoolwork, but it had just been too hard when I was so sad. I told her how horrible I felt for letting Mrs. Johnson down, and that I was scared that she hated me now. When I finished, Mrs. Botts told me she could help me. We decided together that after school every Tuesday I would come to her room for 30 minutes to catch up on homework, study, or just talk about how things were going. Ayers states, "Observing individual children helps us to keep in mind that each child is different and that each is in his or her own universe. Pushing oneself to see and observe and understand every child is an act of compassion and an important part of teaching." As the weeks went on, I was still sad about leaving my friends. However, thanks to Mrs. Bott's kindness and awareness of my situation, I was more relaxed knowing that I could go to her for any kind of help that I needed.